Hello Marvel Heroes fans, my name is Wilfred Wong and welcome to my channel where you will find videos and guides on this free-to-play game called Marvel Heroes. Now today let's talk about the defense. The new defense system has been introduced since the 1.79 patch just recently, and it has revamped quite a lot of things, and I'd like to spend some time talking about this whole defense system, especially on the damage reduction, defense, dodge and deflect as well. Now if you are someone who's very casual and just want to know at the big picture what you should be paying attention to, you've come to the right place. And if you are someone who's into the mathematics and want to go deep into some of this like simulation and so on, you have also come to the right place. So I'm trying to have a little bit of everything here for you, and so in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about the new defense system in a way that everybody can really understand how it works, and more importantly, what focus should you be on when you look into this whole entire defense system. And I've also conducted a simple study on some of the heroes I have, and to just look at it mathematically, how well they are compared to each other. So, I'd like to answer the question, at least to myself, now after this whole revamp, does it mean that all my melee heroes are equally durable? All right, so now that part of the story is more for analysis. Then I'm going to the tips and the gear strategy for the defense stats. And last but not the least, the mathematics behind, and using the case study of Spider-Man as well as Psylocke to showcase to you how you also could derive some of this number. All right, so let's talk about the dodge and deflect. And when it comes to dodge and deflect, it's quite similar to the previous system in a sense that, in the previous system, you have the dodge, you have the evade, you have the block, and you have the deflection and so on. So in this system, it simplifies quite a lot of things, right? So imagine 100% of time you are getting attacked from all angles, and the dodge will be the percentage whereby you have a chance to avoid all the damage. So if your dodge is successful, you avoid damage. Now otherwise, you can deflect the damage, which you will take half the damage instead of taking full damage, and when all fails, you take the full damage. Now this is one interpretation of how the defense system works. You could also think about maybe in a more traditional way, whereby only if you can't dodge an attack, then that the dice rolls again to see whether you can deflect or not. So it's like so-called sequential chance simulation. Now I prefer to take this approach, which is more conservative. It may sort of like overstate things a little, understate things a little bit, which is better than overstating it, because I just would like to take a more conservative approach. I'm not working in Gazillion, so I don't really know exactly how they implement the dice, but there are two ways to interpret it. This is a more conservative approach, but either way, just remember there's a dodge chance there, there's a deflect chance whereby you take half the damage. When all these two fails, you take the full damage. Now that's not the end of the story. When you actually take damage, your damage actually mitigated by something called damage reduction. Damage reduction, think about it as like a final mitigation. The one that protects you is your inner layer of the protection. You've dodged, fail, you deflect, fail or not, you still like to mitigate the damage. So damage reduction will reduce all this damage coming in upon you, whether you can deflect or not. But of course, if you dodge, then you avoid the damage. So think about it like a scale, because it is like a chance game, right? You're getting hit 100 times, not 100 times you get hit all the time, because you can dodge something, you can deflect something, and when all fails, you can also mitigate the damage using the new stat called damage reduction. All right. So now, damage reduction is a new concept. If you open your character sheet, the first item that you see is called damage reduction. Damage reduction can be derived. You can actually derive it yourself and check whether it's correct or not. I've done it for a number of my heroes to be comfortable that my formula is correct, and I think I get to a correct stage. So that damage reduction comes from 5 elements. All right. So the first element is your slot 2 to 5. Slot 2 to 5 means that those like gear beneath your character's portrait. Slot 1, there's no damage reduction, but slot 2 to 5, the white stat, meaning the white number on top, will show you something called a damage reduction. Now, depending on your role, you may get a max out from it, and you can get up to 27% if you get the max roll of all the damage reduction from slot 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so that is 27% base that you have. After that, you may or may not have 8% reduction if you are playing a melee class or a semi-melee, because like a lot of hero nowadays is a hybrid between melee and range, but it is more common that you have a full range with no melee, because when you play range, you're actually from afar and you would likely not to have any melee. But the moment you have some melee in it, you have to be up close and personal, even if you have some range power upon that you can use. So the game is very simple. Some melee hero that is only melee would have the 8% incorporated in a passive or somewhere. Like Spider-Man, you can have the specialization as fighting spider. It will give you 8% on your passive. So if you look at the number damage reduction on your character sheet, it is incorporated inside. However, there are other heroes whereby you can play both sides, like Psylocke. You can be a ranged Psylocke, or you can be a melee Psylocke. So they become a proc. So every time when you hit with the melee, you get 8% damage reduction for 8 seconds or something like that. So it kind of like force you to sort of like, it is really, you're doing melee damage, and hence you earn the 8% reduction. So that is 8%. You have 27 from unique gear. Then after that, your defense rating will be converted in something called defense percentage. So that is one number that is there. Another one is that for the dodge chance you have, for the deflect chance you have, 40% of dodge chance will go into damage reduction, 20% of deflect chance will go into damage reduction. Now, why they're doing that? In the previous design, there was no such thing. So I think, because a lot of time for those people who don't enjoy the spike kind of like gameplay, like for example, a hero that has high dodge, high deflect, like for example, like Psylocke today, you may experience a lot of spike because the only thing that stop or that reduce all damage is called damage reduction, which is mainly from defense. When it comes to dodge chance, only 40% of the dodge chance go into damage reduction, 20% of deflect go into damage reduction. So it is just part of the gameplay. Now, why is it 40-20? I think it is because deflect rating itself, actually the conversion is double of the dodge. So for example, I'll show you the formula later. With the same kind of rating, you actually get double the deflect than dodge. Why? Because deflect only mitigate half the damage, unlike dodge, which mitigate all damage. So net, it is something the same thing, but in a way, it just gives you a different kind of like gearing strategy. I'll talk a little bit about that later. All right. So just to recap, when it comes to damage reduction, there are 5 elements to it, right? So you look at your white stats on your slot 2 to 5. You look at your passive or proc or specialization that gives you 8% for melee. If you don't play melee, you won't have it. Then after that, you have your defense percentage, and then after that, dodge chance 40%. Deflect chance 20%, all add up become your overall damage reduction. So when you derive it, you should match the first number on your character sheet. All right. So now that is that's by and large, but it doesn't apply to all heroes. For example, Moon Knight. Moon Knight is actually pretty fantastic right now because at low health, instead of 8% for melee hero, he actually earned for the 8%. I think when it go down to like 60% missing health below, he actually earned a lot more resilient against the enemy attack. So something to pay attention. It's not always that you read the damage reduction and think, that is the number to sort of like, to decide whether a hero is good or not when it comes to damage reduction. No, you have to pay attention whether or not there's a proc somewhere, whether or not there are some very special mechanic like Moon Knight. All right, so I hope that covered the whole damage reduction wise. Now, what really matter, right? Because it's a lot of number. When you look into the character sheet, they have this like damage reduction, dodge rating, deflect rating, defense rating, total dodge rating, total deflect rating, and total defense rating. And then on top of that, when you mouse over, there's a percentage conversion as well. If you're a casual player, if you just want to just want to know your defense of the hero like a pro. So there's only a couple of stats that you really need to pay attention to, and and you can just enjoy the game without going through the mathematics behind it, because by and large, if you know your hero, you probably know how well or how not too well on some area that he or she. I'll talk a little bit about later on some of the gap or gearing strategy to compensate that. But if you are just someone who is just casually playing a game and say, well, I want some quick way to assess where I am right now, the very first thing to do is to understand what is the damage reduction, all right? Because that is your final mitigation. Look at your character sheet, look at damage reduction. But bear in mind, like I said to you, sometimes your 8% is hidden somewhere. So you have to mouse over all the power. It's very tedious. I've done it like for some of the heroes, like, because you have to check all the power and see which one will proc the 8% and which one is incorporated inside. All right. So I think if you gear a hero, if you look at number looks quite low to you, most likely it is a proc somewhere for melee hero. So just that number is important to you. The second and third important stat is dodge and or deflect chance. All right, so now dodge chance, avoid all damage. Deflect chance, avoid half of damage. So you mouse over it and you understand your hero, how well he or she can dodge some of this kind of like situation. That's all you need to know. Whether it is a damage reduction, what's the value, as well as the dodge and deflect chance. And of course, you have to pay attention whether how high your defense is as well, because later on I'll show you have to understand your hero. Is your hero going to be a defense / dodge, or defense / deflect, or deflect / dodge hero, because that really matter. All right, so now one very important note. I hope even if you stop watching this video right now, say, yeah, I've got it, I know how the whole defense works, congratulations. But remember one thing, total dodge and deflect rating is just a multiplier to the deflect rating itself. It is not your final dodge rating. A lot of people think that total dodge rating is the final number to look into it. So they say, wow, my total dodge rating is 50%, I feel awesome. No, it is not. The 50% is to multiply your dodge rating that will suffer a diminishing return to come into the dodge chance itself. So very importantly, remember one thing, those total dodge, total defense, total deflect, these are just some flavor. They don't really matter that much in this game right now. So these are not your final dodge chance, all right? No, your dodge chance is very simple. Mouse over dodge rating and it will tell you what the dodge chance is, all right? So now you've got the basic right. The next stage is to really use some real example to show you, illustrate to you how it works, all right? So before we go into mathematics, I just look into those, I've done an analysis. I just randomly picked up 8 heroes of different era and to understand, okay, now with this new system, how it's going to affect them. Now, in these 8 heroes that I've chosen, all of them are melee, all of them are geared with a similar Omega system being chosen, because that's how I usually do things, if you realize. And hero synergy as well, I picked a similar one. And more importantly, I use the same team up hero, because team up gear affect the defense stat. I don't want to change that, so I switched to all the same Deadpool team up. All right, so for all my heroes of this selection here, or in fact all my heroes for melee heroes, there's always a passive somewhere, at least one of them, if not more, that will give you the defense kind of like stat. So all of them are at the max. So when you compare, I'm trying to compare an apple to something that is close to an apple, all right? So that is the very important thing. And what I've done is that I look into the damage reduction itself, that will include the passive as well as the proc and the specialization. And I also look into the effective damage reduction as well, because okay, so this is a very important concept that I'd like to introduce right now before I go into the result, so that you understand where things come from, right? So if your damage reduction is say 50%, so whatever comes onto you, be as successful deflect or a failed dodge and fail deflect, you will be able to reduce the damage that it's coming onto you. All right. So although your damage reduction is 50%, in fact it is much higher. Well, it's not much higher. It's higher depending on your dodge chance and also the and deflect chance. Just for the sake of discussion here, for example, if your dodge is as high as 50%, not saying that you will get there because it's close to impossible to get there, but say your dodge is like 50%, so 50% of time you don't get any damage, so you only it become average out, right? So effectively your damage reduction is much higher than your damage reduction as per your character sheet. So I examined both. Now, why is it important? Effective damage reduction is to me, it is a true picture on how well the hero mitigate damage, taking into consideration of dodge chance as well as deflect chance. But it suffers a spike issue because when you have you go to raid or whatnot, when the boss hits you hard, I mean how you can't count on dodge or you can't count on deflect to mitigate this huge incoming damage coming onto you. So the only thing that you have, like I mentioned to you, the final mitigation, your innermost mitigation is your damage reduction. So that will be a more consistent feel to it. And heroes that do not have high enough damage reduction, although may have a high effective damage reduction, may feel that sometimes a spike comes in and you feel a little bit dangerous. You feel the danger when going to certain situation, and that's why, because although mathematically that hero design can take this amount of damage, can mitigate this kind of amount of damage, but because of the low damage reduction, you feel the spike. All right. So now these are only 8 melee hero. I intend to extend this work further, but to how far it is, I also take feedback. I mean, maybe you find this one, useful or not useful. Let me know. All right. So now, so that is the 8 hero I picked. So I'm going to show you some numbers here, right? So and I'm going to talk you through. All right. Just don't jump off the seat right now when you see some of this result. Now, it is not a surprise that Spider-Man does extremely well. I think I talked to a lot of people that are very happy with how Spider-Man performed in Cosmic Patrol. I'm not surprised. If you look at the effective damage reduction, which is the last corner here, last column here, it is close to 58%. Now, I'm not really using any of the costume affix that would further increase this number. Right? This is just a health costume or a crit damage rating costume. All right. So this is just I'm not going all out to get the highest damage reduction. All right. So now Spider-Man on its own, forget about the effective. So if you don't take into consideration of Spider-Man's dodge and deflect, right, his damage reduction, including the passive and proc, is already close to 50%. It's 49%. All right. And with the if you take into consideration of dodge and defense, it is actually 57%, 58%. Now, this is a damage reduction. You have to put things in context, all right? So take a look at X23. X23 is a deflect dodge hero. Now, deflect dodge hero, what does that mean? Is that unlike Spider-Man, that has defense dodge. Now, remember, defense is good stuff. Defense will actually translate to, a large part, all of it will translate to damage reduction. Only 40% of dodge chance go into damage reduction, and only 20% of deflect chance go into damage reduction. So for X23, who is designed as a deflect dodge hero from her passive, her damage reduction is only 37%, right? So that is the fact. And if you look into dodge and deflect chance as well, of course it will go up, but it will go up only by 44%, right? I mean, it go up to 44%. So it is still quite a gap between 44% versus the close to 58% of a Spider-Man. And if you play Spider-Man and you play X23, and you feel a difference. Now, this X23, you may say, well, are you doing movement build? Are you doing bleed build? I've done both analysis, all right? So the number is very similar, and this number actually come from the movement number. So it's the one that you move around. If you do bleed, it will actually get lower. So So what does it really say to you is that the defense heroes are by and large doing pretty well. The defense slash dodge or deflect. Now what do I mean by the main defense stats, right? Forget about total rating. Like I mentioned to you, those are multiplier, but the multiplier is multiplied on the rating that will suffer the diminishing return. So I'm not talking about that total thingy. I'm talking about if you open your character sheet, what are the two biggest numbers you see? If you are not using a costume fix that compensate the third one, all right? So each hero will have two. You open up, you'll see Iron Man is defense, deflect. Spider-Man is defense, dodge. And when it comes to Captain America, defense, deflect. Now, these are very strong heroes. I mean, I'm looking at the number itself. It tells me, I mean, I'm a Iron Man fan. I'm really happy. And the 3 Avengers there wins the war, right? How amazing. If you look at all these 3 of them, they are all having defense as their main stat, and it's not surprisingly that they have a really high damage reduction that will help them in all scenarios, and besides, they still have the extra mile to have the effective damage reduction as well, all right? So if you look at War Machine, it's still doing well as well. Now, although War Machine is not doing as well as Iron Man, and so on, but I believe that War Machine may have other procs as well to help him survive better. Surprise to me is Nightcrawler, because I always thought that Nightcrawler, is a bit fragile and whatnot, but I think you guys verify with me as well. I'm going to verify myself. Nightcrawler is a deflect dodge hero, but then it's actually come up to pretty high when you add all these numbers together towards the end. So there is something that's a surprise to me. I may need to look in the number again. Maybe I make some mistake somewhere. I hope not. But it is good news for the Nightcrawler fans. Now, things drop a little bit below compared to Iron Man, Spider-Man, and Captain America. I suspect it's because Thing has a very, very high health by design. So they compensate a little bit on not going overboard and how tanky he is. I suspect that is how the whole design go. Now, Psylocke is a deflect dodge hero, also suffers somewhat like X-23, so she may play a little bit fragile, but the good thing about Psylocke, like I always say to people, is that every time she dash, she creates a clone by herself and she drops aggro, she becomes stealth, so she's stealth on demand, even more so than Nightcrawler. So I think maybe Gazillion, when designing a hero, try to compensate in some way, but I think what this tells you is that not all the melee heroes are made equal, defensively speaking, and there are heroes that you can exploit for harder content if you know which one is hard, which one survive better. And I think you don't really need a word spreadsheet to tell you this story, because I'm hearing from my friends that for example, Spider-Man is doing really, really well in Cosmic Patrol, and look at number. Guess what? I'm not surprised. All right. So now these are some of my personal take. It's still preliminary. I look in the mathematics. I look in the theory, right? But in practice, I may still need to sort of like experience it. But by design, I think I'm just guessing Gazillion's design philosophy that it try to drive different kind of play style, because there's no point having 53 heroes having the same amount of mitigation, right? Because that will become totally boring. So some hero may feel a little bit fragile because they're compensated by other things, all right? By the fact that maybe you can go stealth, or so that's why there's a lot of intangible mitigation as well that is hard to incorporate in. Like if some hero may be fragile, but they have a really high health regen or good health regen, then maybe the hero can stun or go invisible, go stealth, and so on. So these are some of the intangible mitigation that probably the number becomes smaller in some sense, but if you play him or her well, you can compensate. So in a way, the way I feel is that there are some heroes that are very much like easier to play as a hero. There are some heroes that may demand you to exploit other intangible mitigation so as to unlock the full potential of mitigation. All right, so that is my take on it. But as the content getting harder, like the Danger Room, I personally would invest my time on a hero whereby looks really good on this table that I have, because if the hero is strong in the damage reduction as well as effective damage reduction, I think I can invest a lot of good gear onto him or her so as to conquer certain very hard content, because there's no point in gearing all 52 heroes. I know for sure I can't be able to do that, not enough OD marks. So and of course other resources as well. So that is something that I'll use my knowledge, my information to sort of do that. And I'd like to share that with you later, probably a couple of months down the road when I have more feel about how different heroes perform. All right. So now, I think yeah. I mean, I think all in all, the last point I'd like to take is that I do value damage reduction more than effective reduction because it's just the way it goes. When it comes to harder content, damage reduction is pretty much like king, right? Because there is a very large frontier of mitigation. All right, so now they understand some heroes are just different from others, and now they understand that maybe there are some gaps they like to close. So this part of the video is to share with you where those stats come from and how can you best close the gap. There's some tips to share with you. All right. So now there are various gear and so on that give you certain kind of stats that will contribute to this new defense system. Now, obviously, like I said before, the slot 2 to 5, the white stat on top of the first line, the stat of the gear, and the passive and prop will give you something called damage reduction. You don't get it anywhere, most likely not anywhere, right? So that, of course, some passive power will give you that. And after that, you can roll costume affixes on the dodge and deflect. Unfortunately, I don't think there's defense right now, right? It would be cool if there is, really cool, but I don't think there is right now. So the costume affixes is dodge and deflect, and it's a huge amount of dodge and deflect that you can use for your costume. All right. So and after that, you can enchant as well. You can enchant defense and dodge. I don't think today, as of today, I don't think you can do a deflect. Right. So that's enchant. Euroforge, as you know, you can have a DPS. Euroforge give you 200 damage rating on a certain type, or have an 800 defense. So that is one source of defense. Team up gear as well. Give you the team up gear. Give you total defense, dodge, and deflect. Remember, these are just multiplier to your existing kind of dodge rating and so on and so forth. And as I will show you later, actually it's a little bit counterintuitive because you actually have to avoid some of this by design area to sort of beef up certain area that's lacking. All right, so I'll talk a little bit about that later. And also there are other gears as well, rings or whatnot that give you a lot of other stacks. Omega system is yes and no, because in order to gain defense, for instance, you have to probably lose the dodge for block. So and there are another note as well whereby you have to lose the crit rating whereby you gain defense or you can gain specific defense type. So it's the Omega system as of today is not really that not the answer. I don't think it's an answer when it comes to the total defense system. For health regen, yes, but for the rest of it, I think it still needs some work. And hero synergy as well. You can pick some of these heroes that give you defense and deflect, not defense, sorry, deflect and the dodge. All right, so there are some tips for you to trade off. There's a huge diminishing return, and you can see it in the spreadsheet in a little bit later on the defense, dodge, and deflect rating. All right, because you need to convert those rating into percentage. Percentage is what it matters. All right, prioritize the stat that you have the least of it. Those that you have zero deflect, like Iron Man, right, is a defense hero. If you gear Iron Man as a dodge, if you say roll a costume affix on dodge, he become like having defense, deflect, and dodge as well, and all will help you add up together to give you the good effective kind of mitigation. And same goes to like Spider-Man. If you actually roll deflect on the Spider-Man, it's actually wonderful. Don't stack on one stat really. A lot of people think that dodge is great because dodge is like they give you the avoid all damage, and deflect not as good. But it's not true, because the formula I'll show you later shows that the same rating, dodge will actually only have half of the deflect, the chance itself. All right, so pick the stat that have the least and pump that instead. Your goal is to have 3 of them equally kind of awesome, and that is also the very reason whereby hero that's lacking defense, meaning that they only have the dodge and deflect, more fragile, because it's very hard to gear for defense. It's a lot easier gear for dodge and deflect. Just saying, right? So, For the enchant perspective, I mean, I've run through some number I'll share with you. Defense is still king. All right, defense you can get if you want to enchant, go for defense. And yeah, I think overall, if you need to trade off overall, I think defense is still a better stat. Now, to give you some idea, what you can do when you say, okay, fine, I'm going to a different strategy now, right? Because I say I want to experiment on and a more tanky. I want to build my character to be more tanky. So some numbers to share with you. If you want to roll the costume affix on the on dodge or deflect, remember the missing stat that you have, you will likely gain about 5 to 7% increase in effective damage reduction. All right, so whatever damage reduction you have, like Spider-Man, you now have around close to 67%, and another 5% to it, or another 6% to it. That's the number. All right, when it comes to effective damage reduction. And then if you are lacking on the defense, like for example, like Psylocke or X23, you may use the defense Euroforge as well as enchant for the enchant for defense. It's not dodge and deflect. Then you have the 3.5% that you get it upfront. All right, so that's why a defense hero is still much better because you gain much more. Going for the dodge and deflect on the costume versus the defense from the Euroforge and enchant. All right, and last but not the least, you may get around 10% if you use a legendary 80 shield. So you could go crazy and just roll the costume affixes on that, use a defense Euroforge and enchant accordingly, and after that use a legendary shield. All right. Now, if you enjoy the mathematics behind all these numbers, I would like to share this with you. It doesn't come from me, and I verified this number. It is exactly correct. It is correct when it comes to the character sheet. It's important because when it comes to theory crafting, you want to have a consistent feel across different heroes, and you can sort of verify that your formula is correct as well. Your interpretation of it is correct as well. So if you look at this formula itself, what it really transpired to is that the defense rating would probably give you a quite a very decent conversion to the rating itself. Defense and dodge not so, and then if you see the 0.9 on deflect and 0.45 on dodge, that is exactly what I'm talking about. For the same rating, yes, deflect or dodge, deflect will have double a chance of dodge, because they mitigate 50%. It is exactly the same thing actually, if you ask me. So don't stack on dodge just thinking that it will avoid all damage. That is not that is not the way. The way is to stack on the attribute that you miss the most because of diminishing return. All right. So now after that, like I mentioned to you, the damage reduction is the defense from above plus 20% of deflect, 40% of dodge, and that's it. And there's a hard cap of 9%, but I ran through a number. It's actually quite hard to get 90%, even with all these things adding to it. Spider-Man probably may be able to hit a little bit closer if you use a legendary 80 shield, but probably it's pretty hard to get there. All right? And I don't see there's a real use to go there. So I think before I go into a case study itself, before I go into the mathematics that may bore some of you, just remember this game is about the balance. All right, just because we have a new defense system does not mean that you have to go all out to get this really highest damage reduction, because you have to kill target as well. You cannot pass the cosmic gate if you cannot down the target within a stipulated time. You cannot win the Ultron gold if you can't kill Ultron fast. Danger room later on, you may have difficulty if you do not have enough DPS against the target. So DPS is very important. All these numbers here is helping you to understand where you are with the hero. If you have problem with your hero, then if you want to address some of the fragile issue, that is where all this new defense system is going to help you. All right. The last part of the video is to share with you how I derive certain numbers, and and how I make certain claims, and how my analysis is being conducted. And you may do the same as well. It's very, very easy. If you have some mathematics or Excel or spreadsheet kind of like skill, I'm very sure you can churn out your numbers well. But the story you're going to hear is going to be the same. My story and your story is going to be the same. Yeah. So now when it comes to this whole thing. So I'm going to walk through with you a little bit slowly, just recap of where we are, because this is very familiar to me, may not be to you. So the first thing I do is to capture from the screen what is the damage rating, what is the deflect rating, defense rating, as well as dodge rating. The one in yellow is input by me. And make sure you go into the training room, because you may be affected by other players around you, may have a certain insignia and so on, your number will go up and down and so on. Go in the training room by yourself and note down all this number. Now, remember the formula that I shared with you earlier on. You can actually convert the deflect rating into all this formula into the actual deflect and the dodge rating. All right. So so that is something that you may want to do to sort of like look into your hero and to see where things are. So that is one thing. Now the total defense and dodge and deflect rating is not something that you would be paying attention to in this analysis, unless you do what if analysis, which is the green things here. The green thing here is actually my what if analysis. So I can say, what if I use Euroforge defense, which give me 800 of them. So I punch in 800 and I see a number changes here. Then I've got an increased damage reduction. So this is for my what if scenario, and what if we then take into consideration of total defense rating. So I'm going to do it a little bit slower again. The defense, deflect, and dodge rating are being converted into the chance itself using the formula you've seen, and then the full rating itself here plus 20% of the deflect, 40% of dodge. These three number will give you a total, give you the damage reduction itself, all right, which is 15.46. So, and I have another portion here is to actually combine the rating, because before, like for example, if I take and say 800 here, then note this number here, instead of 3144, it becomes like 4183, and of course that would correspond another increase here. That will give you an increase in this number here. All right, so I'm going to take it away again and do just like yeah. So then after that, that is your number A, which is including what if scenario if you want to do. Then after that, you have the melee, proc, and passive. You can be 0% or 8% depending on which hero or what build that you are having. All right, so that's B. Then after that, you have slot 2, 3, 4, 5. Slot 1 usually have 0. I've seen it all 0. I cannot say everything is 0, but so far for all the hero I've seen, slot 1 is always 0 damage reduction. So look down on the damage reductions. 27 is the highest. You may not get it. I don't get it. So I'm still missing 2% somewhere or 1.8% somewhere. Add the A, B, and C will give you the total damage reduction itself. All right. So that is the kind of damage reduction itself. This number should match with the character sheet. If your character sheet incorporate the passive 8% inside, all right. It may not. You may be missing 8% because it is a proc, but you would like to factor that into your mathematics because you have the proc constantly anyway. All right. So now that is part one of the analysis to calculate what is the total damage reduction. Why is it useful? Because you can actually play around with all these things and say, well, should I have like 450 defense enchant, or should I have the dodge, which is 300 enchant dodge, right? So they give you all this what if analysis on that to see the change. And after that, more importantly, to calculate the effective damage reduction, then you do a very simple analysis, which is like, imagine you have 100 unit of a monster blob hit you for 100 points. Then if you are able to dodge it, you receive 0. If not, then you receive half of it, which is 50%, but it's being reduced by 48.66%. They give you a certain, this is what you get if you're hit by blob when you deflect it. But if you cannot deflect what blob is hitting you, cannot deflect what, cannot dodge it, then you eat all 100%, but of course it's been reduced by 48.866%. Then you are effectively receiving 42.16%. Now, after that, you just have to do a final calculation here, which is basically, you say, look at dot chance. Here are the dot chance, modify dot chance. So you say, okay, 9%, 9.9, okay, hang on, 13.22%, I'm taking 0 damage. 9.33%, I'm taking 25.67 damage. And the remaining, I'm taking this much damage. So that is the effective one. So like I say, the effective is always higher than total because effective will not take, things may go high, things may go low. But like I always say to people, it is always the spike that kills you, right? Or your hero. So total damage reduction to me is very important. So after that, I can do different scenario to it, like I can like play around with the number here, and then after that I note down all the changes and so on. So I can say that, okay, so I have, my Spider-Man has a pretty okay deflect, but it's a really high dodge and okay defense. So I realized that if I equip a dodge costume versus deflect costume, although if you look at my okay, so this is a good example, right? Total dodge rating 44. So whoa, I'm multiplying all the dodge rating by 44%. It's great. I should all out and gear stack dodge. No, you don't stack dodge, because you look at the because like I said to you, there's a diminishing return, and in fact this is what the story tells you. If you stack dodge, you actually increase lesser compared to stacking you stack up on the deflect itself, right? So that is something that you may want to take into consideration as well, all right? And then after that, you may want to take into consideration what is the dodge, what is the defense, and so on. And after that, maybe go what if scenario. There are many scenarios you can do, and with all this worksheet, spreadsheet, you can do all those sort of things. So that is the picture for Spider-Man. And if you look at the picture for, say, Psylocke, right? Psylocke, like I said to you, the defense is very small. So if you look at the character sheet, immediately you know that this hero is really bad in defense, but she is good at deflect and dodge. But like I said, this is actually weaker stat compared to defense, but you have to adjust it with your playstyle. Alright, so same formula that run in the whole thing, then you look down the deflect. I mean, even if you look at total defense rating, and all this total rating, I mean, it's biased towards the other two. But you can actually play around with all this scenario which I have, and after that, look at all this number again. I mean, like I said, I mean, it is a much lower number on the total damage reduction. Of course, the effective one is a little bit higher. But I mean, that's the whole point about this exercise, is to sort of wow, what if I do a defense, so does it mean that I should do a defense roll forge and challenge with the 450 defense? Yeah, I mean, it gives you another 3.42%, get closer to the 50% kind of effective damage reduction. But however, the baseline is still this one here. However, the total damage reduction is still this one, which is less than 40%. So, you can't really phase tank everything. For Psylocke, there's a take-home message. You have to play around it. So Psylocke is a little bit harder to play in that sense, but it doesn't mean that she's not effective. She's still effective. You have to play her well. All right. So I hope that gives you an example. I don't need to go through each one of them, because otherwise it will take another hour for me to talk about it. But if you have questions and so on, welcome to drop me a note in game, drop me a note in YouTube as well. I'm happy to answer for you. Now, just ping me in game. My name is in game is called Lays, and feel free to check out some of my other videos as well. At the description of this video, besides the time code, we'll have the whole list of, you go back to my website, I have a whole list of updated videos. So if you find this video interesting, maybe you want to take a look at what's the best artifact, what's the best moonverse, what's the guide for this hero, that hero, I have it all for you. Alright, so next time we see each other, goodbye and enjoy the event, and drop me notes, questions and so on.